to the conversation today. Right, okay. I think we are at time. People are dialing in fast and steady. And yeah, so welcome everyone. We're recording this for posterity, and you will get a recording because you've signed up and you're here. Really looking forward to this conversation. It is such an important topic. And the thing that I always talk about that in the work that I do around cultural intelligence, the first thing that comes to people's mind is nationality. Culture means you're Indian or you're Danish or you're American. Yes, of course, nationality plays such a huge part in who we are and how we show up. But then the time that we were born, not only just where we were born, but when we were born has such a huge impact on how we show up at work and in life. I'm raising a teenager and I see quite a difference in not just the fact that I was a teenager in India. That was a whole different ball game, right? There was no phones, there was pagers maybe, and now I have a teenager growing up in the UK. So not only is it that, we're talking 40 years apart, but we're also talking what digitalization has done to the way she is viewing the world right now. So that's a bit of a personal take. But professionally, I see there's five generations in the workplace, and we've got three generations on this call right here. So the chat function's open. Please feel free to ask questions. We'll get to that at the end of the conversation. But yeah, absolutely. Let's keep that chat going and let's keep that interaction going. I'm Ritika Vadhva. I'm the CEO and founder of Prabhav Global. Prabhav means impact in Hindi, which is my mother tongue. And what I do through my work with organizations around the world is use the transformative power of cultural intelligence for impactful leadership, which is how do we convert our intentions, our positive intentions, into impact for those around us, and that includes generational impact. So, with not further ado, we've got people from all over the world on this call, not only just three different generations. And let's kick off with the person who's farthest away from us right now. Lela is in Florida, dialing in from there. So please, a panelist, if you might please introduce yourself and then tell us what's your motivation at work right now? What keeps you going?
Yeah, morning everyone from Florida. I'm here for an IBM conference. I'm Lela, I'm 21 years old, and I lead global student strategy for IBM Z, which is our mainframe and enterprise computing side of the business. My motivation really is to stop treating my generation like the leaders of tomorrow. We hear that thrown around quite a lot, and rather think about how we can design systems to let us lead today. I joined IBM really to turn what was my lived experience being a self-taught coder from a really early age and engaging with technology beyond the textbooks, and seeing my friends be demotivated by the way computer science was taught at school. And actually, I wanted to turn that experience and that frustration into some action, with the pandemic being like that turning point for me. So I'm now building different models of youth-led and learner-led more broadly, innovation, where both early professionals and students aren't just invited to be participants or to listen or to absorb everything in this one way street, but rather feel like we have the agency to drive and shape the digital transformation. Pleased to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Not the leaders for tomorrow, the leaders for today. Yes? Am I quoting that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Love it. My God, where are the hands clapping? Thank you, Lela. Thank you. Right, Jacob, let's move to Denmark.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. I was looking forward to this short session. My name is Jacob. I'm the Chief Executive of the Fire and Rescue Service in the capital area of Denmark. And I have to excuse my English. It's not my mother tongue, so you have to bear with my English. I think my Danish is even worse in your ears. But I've been actually in the fire service now nearly 30 years. I think it says it's all why I'm here, because it's a really purpose-driven organization. Working with the Fire and Rescue Service, you really do make a difference each and every day together with all your colleagues to society. So I'm actually driven of being the safety net of the society. what drives me as the chief executive is how to make my organization work so we each and every day can do our very best to help the citizens of Copenhagen. So that's my purpose. So and then you're
Jacob,
feel
tell
free
us
to
a
ask any questions, of course.
Yes, thank you, Jacob. Definitely your English is way better than my Danish, so we'll take that. But also, I'd love for you to mention a little bit about you being on the National Emergency Task Force, yeah? Which is amazing.
Besides my job as the chief executive, I'm also advisor to the government in how to future-proof the fire and rescue service in Denmark and how to make sure that they Danish on national level also provides good service in the future due to the development in society and also to the security situation. So
yeah, thank you for that. Shrina, last but not the least.
Thank you, Ritika. Lovely to be here with you all. I'm Shrina. I'm currently a vice president at Deutsche Bank, which is a German investment bank. And there I specifically focus on sustainability-related transactions. For me, I think my motivation just comes from being a part of a financing institution that has such a global reach, can actually create impact when it comes to making decisions about where we're putting our money, where we're helping investors put their money in terms of how we can address the challenges that are caused by climate change and a lot of other issues as well. I grew up in India as well, in Gujarat, which is a very entrepreneurial state, very focused on finance. So I grew up with this bug about finance and always wanted to be in a sector where we can use the power of finance in a positive way. So I've been doing this for 3 years, absolutely love it. But before this, I used to be at the World Economic Forum in Geneva, New York, where I worked with the investors, some of the largest names you've heard of and thought of, whether they're sovereign wealth funds or private equity funds or even VC funds, helping them think through what their investment strategies could look like and how they can invest in future-proof businesses.
Thank you, Srinal. What a fascinating and motivating channel. Motivational panel. So I sit slightly apart as an entrepreneur on this panel, actually. I worked in the public and private sector for 30 years. And what sort of drove me and the generation I represented, I'm seeing that a lot around me right now. What drove me to start my business is because impact sat at the heart. I wanted to make a difference in this world for those coming behind me, for those that look like me. And I felt like organizations just didn't get it. So I felt driven to start a business because I wanted to do this work on my terms for those that look like me and those that have identities in the world that are marginalized, that are underrepresented in the boardrooms where they need to have a time and space. And so I felt compelled to start my business to be able to do this work on my term. And I walk into boardrooms and work with leaders across the world, bringing my true self and identity to it, which is so liberating. And I just felt like organizations weren't ready for it when I was working in the corporate world anyway. So that's my motivation, impact at the heart of it. Okay, thank you. So really, why is it important for your industry to navigate intergenerational workplaces, Lela? Why is this even a thing? Why have they hired you?
Yeah, I definitely come at it from both a professional perspective, but also a lived experience side, because I am kind of part of that well, we all are part of the intergenerational piece that we're talking about. But especially in the tech industry, we can't rely on previous thinking to address the problems that we're facing today, both when it comes to thinking of solutions, but also to thinking forward and responding to emerging technology. So whether it's climate change or AI governance, we can't wait for this handover between generations where it's like, oh, like the next generation taking on a role like they may have previously done. And this is especially important in the mainframe industry and IBM Z where I work, because some of a lot of our world's most critical systems, whether it's banking, whether it's airlines, whether it's insurance providers, rely on these decades old infrastructure. So we need to have both this intergenerational exchange between the people who've built it, but also the people who'll reinvent it. So within my work, we have not only waited for early professionals to be onboarded as new employees, and we've also not waited for students to come through what often can be industry-wide, and I think for everyone, a demoralizing application process when coming into work. But we've actually thought about how we can proactively engage students and learners today. So offering them free, practical, hands-on learning to gain industry standard credentials, establishing student ambassador programs where students aren't just being leaders on campus, but also they're seen as emerging leaders within the industry. So it isn't just a diversity goal or a checkbox, it's really an operational necessity.
Operational necessity. I think, yeah, it's not an if or a when or a but. It has to be that it is a necessity. If you don't take in the point of view of the generations coming in and not treat them as the leaders for tomorrow, but the leaders of today, that's at your own peril as an organization. So thank you for sharing that, Leila. Jacob, share some of your experience with us, please.
Yeah, I can say that within my organization, we have now 4 different generations working, all from the baby boomers to Generation Z. So we do have a lot of what we call generational issues. So why it's important for me to work with this is I need to solve how we can stay relevant as a workplace, also for new employees, so we can actually recruit and retain also for the future. And that's I think that's one of our biggest challenges. It's how we can recruit and retain for the future, and we need to understand the new generations coming and how to embrace them, but also be true to the values of our organization. So that's why it's very important for us to work with this.
Excellent. Thank you, Jacob. Shrinal, what's going on at Deutsche Bank?
I mean, I echo what Jacob and Leila have said, but I think when you think about banking, there are so many different aspects to it, whether it is product development, how we're designing specific products for Gen Z or for millennials within the wealth management business, or whether you think about technology, how are we trying to make our transactions faster, making sure that, a client from Austria can have their business running very smoothly with a supplier from Vietnam. And then there's also the human aspect. So, talent retention, talent development, etc. And I think we're trying to address this challenge across a lot of different dimensions, because there are just so many aspects to any bank, I would say, not just Deutsche Bank. And what I think makes it very important is that we now have people who are starting as early as 16 and 17 years old through the apprenticeship program. I mean, this year, for the first time, I was training an apprentice, and it was the first time that I worked with someone who was 17 and trying to learn the ropes of banking, which is so different from someone like me, even though, well, until a couple of months ago, I used to think I was young, but that has changed for sure. So I think just seeing how they're interacting with me or with our managing directors who've been doing this for 35 years is quite interesting, but also challenging, because they're asking the difficult questions and making it imperative for us to also reassess how we're thinking about training them, how we're thinking about involving them in deals, for example, how we're thinking about making sure that they have the right exposure to the clients. But at the same time, we're also teaching them the very foundational skills that sometimes they think they might have, but perhaps just need a little bit more development, whether it is writing in a professional setup, which is fairly basic, but sometimes you need to be quite aware of how you're dealing with a CEO versus a managing director versus an analyst versus your peers. So it's been a really fun experiment for me, but also to extrapolate that to a bank where we're just trying to solve at all these different levels and how we can make it a better functioning workplace.
Wow, gosh, what amazing answers to that, and really some very poignant challenges. Let me share one of the challenges I've faced recently. So my training is very much designed for middle management, senior management of a certain generation, as you can imagine. a client asked me to facilitate a workshop for apprentices and graduates within their organization. So I went in with the usual workshop that I facilitate. It was online, quite a lot of interaction as I normally have. Everybody's videos were off. That was a starter for 10. Okay. And then even when the videos were on, there was a lot of multitasking going on. I thought the focus wasn't there. And those on the call were distracted. And I started feeling really uncomfortable as a facilitator. Yeah. Because in my head, I didn't use my CQ. I did not plan for a session specifically for what the Gen Z is looking for. So it didn't go down to plan. Biggest lesson learned, and that's where, cultural intelligence and learning from your mistakes and that CQ strategy part. I went back to the drawing board, and the next session I had with the same generation, completely modified in how I'm using tech, how I'm getting them to interact, what I'm expecting from that session. And really, this is where organizations in the here and now have to mold and adapt. That's the key word, because otherwise you're just not going to get the outcomes you wanted to get in the first place. You're just not going to get it. And it's not that their way is wrong or our way is right. It's not about that. It's just different. And so how are we adapting to that different ways is really, really important. Thank you. Okay, so what are some of we've articulated what the motivation is, we've articulated why it's important, it's a no-brainer, it's crucial, it's essential. But what are some of the challenges your organizations are facing in navigating intergenerational workplaces? Do they even realize that we have to navigate intergenerational workplaces? Lela? Sorry.
I was like, are we going to change up the order? No, that's okay. I think for me, I've been really fortunate, and I don't mean to sound cliche, but it was such an imperative because especially in the tech industry, there's such a talent gap in the sense, and particularly in my industry, my sector, because they stopped recruiting at a certain period. So there's like a 10-year age gap between some of the early professionals and some of those who've been in the business for a bit longer. So there was a sense of urgency when I came along with the solution. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And I think that the hardest part actually has been letting go for some people and letting us lead, giving us the control, sharing the budgets, the decision-making power, and the room to fail forward. Because we, as I say, there has been that age gap, so their power arguably hasn't been questioned. So when my generation have come along, and as you say, with all of these differences and how we expect to engage, how we expect to show up at work, how we expect to collaborate with teams and have client relationships and things like that, there really has been a difference, and arguably even more stark because of that years where there wasn't hiring within the sector. And especially within my sector of the tech industry, there is a lot of loyalty to the business where people will come onto the mainframe and work in that space for life. So realizing that my generation will come along, they'll pick up skills, they'll gain the experiences they need out of the opportunity, and then they'll move on to whatever's next, because tech is ever becoming more and more agile and people are moving around. You don't really stay in a job for life anymore, like I don't think as much. So really, until that way of thinking shifted and we thought differently about power and the importance of cultural intelligence, and having someone like myself who, as I say, has had quite a unique entry into the workplace from such a young age, we need to make sure that inclusion doesn't become a sense of like performance rather than progress.
Say that again. Inclusion doesn't become
because inclusion then risks becoming performance and not progress.
I love that. Okay, inclusion doesn't become
inclusion risks becoming performance and not progress. You're making me question my own words. It's early.
No, I love it. I love it. I love that. Inclusion doesn't have to be about performance. It has to be about progress.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are the sound
you
bites.
Can have young people and you can have the next generation in the workplace, but if we're not included, and if we don't feel like, if we're just the face of an inclusive campaign, or yeah, we've got a young person around the table. No, we should be the ones who have the same power? When are we going to hand that over? Like, when do we say, right, it's the previous generation, like that's it now, it's time for them to step up, it's time for them to actually have control? Because it's one thing listening to what we have to say, but are you actually going to implement it? And that's why even with students who aren't yet hired by us or our clients, we make sure that they actually have the ability to co-create with us. I don't just go to my student ambassadors and say, hey, like, what would you like to see done differently? I actually say, well, help us shape that and let's learn together and go through this experience.
I mean, this is so important. I just want to dig in a little bit on that one. What is stopping organizations to do it this way? Like, why? What's the crux of it? What's the root of it?
Well, I think so for learners, we're just as keen to speak with industry as industry are to speak with us. And I think that that's a big barrier first, because I meet students who are like, oh, you know, I got rejected from this internship, so they don't want me anyway. And then I'll meet industry leaders be like, oh, I'm really old. Like, I don't get what kids of today want or are passionate for. So we both groups think that we don't want to talk to each other, or we're not interested. And the issue actually is that we are keen to speak to each other, but we're not speaking the same language, we're not dancing the same style. Like, we need to look at, and that's why it's been so important that I was brought on board, because I've been able to bridge that gap. And I truly believe that you can't do it without having that someone with that lived experience. That's not something that you can gain from years of experience in industry, but that's just genuinely from me being of the audience that we're trying to engage. And I've seen how it's changed over time. And even I've learned as well, because I've come in with these ideas and with that experience, but it's learning how to convey it in a way that actually relates to industry. Because, you know, I came in and it was like all about KPIs and about metrics, and like, this is how we run as a business. There's a strong sense of hierarchy in many ways. And whilst I had mentors and I had colleagues who were incredibly supportive and saw what I was saying, when it fell back into a system that was architected to be in this very structure, it was, how do we actually let success stories and impacts, how do we measure that in a way that will actually keep the, you know, the money people and like those measuring the numbers happy. So yeah, it was a that's the difference. It's them thinking like they don't know quite how to speak with my generation, and also once they are speaking with us, like, how do we make sure it's not a nice to have but a necessity?
I'm taking lots of notes. Thank you, Leila. Jacob, what are some of the challenges in your organization?
Well, how long time do we have? I think we have a lot of challenges. I'll just address a few of them here. I think I belong to a generation where we are loyal to the workplace. We're going to stay there for a long time. Next month, we have this Jubilee party where we celebrate all of the employees who have 25 or 40 years of Jubilee in the organization. Next month, we have 8 people who's been in my organization for 40 years. So our generation is very, very loyal. And now we see a new generation coming in. I can totally follow Leila on this one. They are here for a shorter period of time. And when they leave us, we are actually quite upset, because we think they don't like us. So when they leave us early, and then we have a conflict, because we believe, as the old generation, they're leaving us because they don't like us, they don't want to be loyal to the workplace, but they are leaving us due to other purposes. So understanding each other is very, very difficult. We also have many of our middle management is from the generation what we call X or Y, and they are used to having. We are founded in the military, the fire service, so it's very hierarchy with the general in the top, and the more stars you have on your shoulders, the more saying you have. So we are very used to following orders. So if when I started and the station manager came to me and said, you have to clean up the garage, I wouldn't ask a question about it. I will just do it. And now we have the new generation coming in, and the first question they ask when they are told to clean up the garage is why. And it's a huge conflict between the management or the manager who's not used to having this have this question, and then the new generation. And it's not because the new generation don't want to do it; they just want to know why. So we have a lot of work ahead of us in educating our management to lead in another way. That's some of our issues, and it's been several years since I do not interfere with our communication, how we communicate with our surroundings, because I'm way too old. So it's a lot of how we communicate, and it's also about how we take in all the new knowledge that the new generations come to bring into our organization. How can we use that in our organization in a good way? And then the last thing I'll mention is that the new generation is very they are not so patient. They want to explore their opportunities right away. They don't want to wait like we did for 10, 15 years to take the next step in our career. So this impatient meets the patient generations, and that's clashes as well. So we're working a lot about the management, how to learn these generational differences to our management, so we can actually include everybody and gain the best from everything. So that was only a couple of our challenges at the moment.
Yeah, the why and the communication, and how do we engage so that we can gain the best from each other's perspective, which is why people were hired in the first place. Those are real life challenges. Shrinal, let's come to you.
I think probably the challenges on hierarchy and talent developments are common across industries, including banking. So maybe just to add another dimension to it, what I could highlight as a challenge potentially for banking is also that now the generation that is able to, let's say, make a lot of money really quickly are also startup founders, for example, who are 20, 19, 22, right? So once they amass a certain type of wealth, the question becomes, what do they do with it? And that's where, again, then bankers have to come into play to help them figure out what can be done. But typically, wealth management, for example, has just been such an ancient industry in general, that you're not going to be able to entice that customer base if you don't speak their language, if you're not aware about the latest asset classes that are possible. They want to think about sports and arts and a lot of different aspects that maybe traditional banks haven't considered as much. So I think just on the product development side, there are certainly challenges, not just between different employees within a workplace, but also the clients and the organizations as well. And then they translate pretty easily into the organization itself, because we see similar issues in terms of hierarchy. How do you make sure that everything that's shared by, let's say, junior bankers is communicated to the senior bankers, and then there are decisions being made? Because we also have a lot of workshops, for example, where you're able to talk about what issues you're facing, etc. But then if they're not resulting in something in a short period of time, then the likelihood that us and folks younger than us will be very patient about it is quite minimal. Banking is also a very, I would say, high pressure environment, in the sense that once you've learned a certain skill set in that high pressure environment, you're very easily able to take that and move to another bank or to any other organization. There will always be organizations looking at hiring you. So if we're not able to make sure we retain them, then we're training them for 2 years. They're moving to another bank, and then we're just losing that talent completely. If they're moving to another industry, it's different, because then they can become our champion. But if we're losing them to other banks, that's a bit of a challenge that I think pretty much all banks are struggling with. There was a phase around the pandemic and a few years later where there were hiring freezes, so people weren't moving as much. But now that that's no longer the case, you have a lot more opportunity to move. And if the bank's not offering, like if you think about, for example, HSBC, they have an innovation bank now that's specifically looking at startups and ventures, etc. And I'm sure a lot of younger analysts would be very keen to get that type of an experience. So I think it falls onto the industry how to make sure how you rebrand some of the things that you do, because it's not like, for example, I'm not working on private placement for startups, but we're calling it differently, we're structured differently. So we just need to think about how do you reinvent or redesign the corporate structures to make sure that everyone knows exactly what's happening and that they're not falling behind by being in this organization.
Yeah, excellent points there, Srinal. Thank you, all of you. This is great conversation in the chat as well. Some great observations around it's not that they don't want to do it, they just want to know why. So Jude is saying it's so refreshing and reassuring to hear that understanding from an older generation, while generations might not be speaking the same language, that they felt it's a wonderful piece of translation. Excellent. And then I've asked the question to the audience around why do you think this new generation is viewed as impatient? And so some amazing replies coming back. And I love this one around patience requires faith. And I think a lot of young people don't have faith in employers to deliver what they're looking for. I did speak to a young person and they did exactly say that. They said, we are trying to work in a system that wasn't set up for us to succeed in the first place. So there's that impatience and the lack of faith coming. And Emily's saying it's partly societal. Exactly, youngsters have grown up in a world of instant gratification. So how does that translate? Okay, thank you. Keep that coming in. I think this is the meat on the bone of our webinar. I'd love to, I'll start with Srinal. So let's shake it up a bit around what is your organization doing to ensure better collaboration between generations? What are, those that are listening in, this is where they want to know what are organizations doing to navigate the generational differences?
I think there are a couple of things. There are obviously the more formal aspects to it, where we have an employee resource group, which is really focused on that intergenerational collaboration. So we organize a lot of events where you have very senior bankers and then very junior bankers come together and speak about, day-to-day work, etc. We have a lot of mentorship programs where young bankers are paired with more senior bankers to kind of figure out how to navigate this industry, what it might look like if you're in the investment bank and maybe that's not something you're interested in. You could just move into the private bank or corporate bank, and there might be something that you're more interested in. And I think both of these programs have been quite successful and helpful. But then there's also kind of the more informal side of things where it's about how you're providing feedback. For example, we've noticed that whenever, even if it's a very small piece of feedback, it's accompanied by very solid reasoning. And then we're asking some of our younger analysts to just repeat that back to us in a way and tell us like why you think this was told to you. That's been working quite effectively, and they really understand why they're being given certain feedback, take it on, and then almost never make the same mistake again, if you will. And then that's not something that is being taught formally, but I think now we have enough proof points within different divisions that we've seen this work, that everybody's encouraged to do this more. We've also incorporated feedback mechanisms where you can also ask for feedback from people that might not be your direct managers, for example, because sometimes you will end up working with a lot of different teams, and therefore it's imperative that they're able to chime in as well. It's not just reliant on this one person who's responsible to manage you, because they might not even always have full visibility. And I do think that all of these initiatives are paying off. We're really focusing on diversifying hiring events as well. So we did one hiring event in the US, for example, where the focus was on styling and how do you make sure you show up in the workplace in a certain way. That was a huge hit. I think we had probably some of the most incredible people join us. And we had an instructor who talked about styling in your day-to-day versus weekend. How can you use styling as a way to develop your image, etc. We had one session on makeup, for example, whether you should do it, whether you shouldn't do it. Some people feel comfortable, some are like me, don't enjoy it, don't like it. So it was just such a fun way of conversing with talent that we might want to bring in, as opposed to just talking about, here are the 5 divisions we have at the bank, this is the recruitment cycle. And I think all of this is working quite well. You're on mute.
Of course I am. I was just saying great tips there. Thank you for sharing that, Srinal. Jacob, what's the fire services in Copenhagen doing about intergenerational collaboration?
Nothing.
Oh.
No. That's not true. Actually, we're doing a lot of things. Actually, we're trying to figure out what to do as well. I think it's an ongoing process where we certainly don't deny ourselves being wiser in the process. But we do a lot of things, and we also keep a lot of things of the things we have. But one of the things we have made is actually a career guide. So actually, you know, when you come into our organization, what's your opportunities, and what do you need to achieve them? Because we know the new generation, they want to see a path in their way. And then I'm very eager to how to, it's no problem recruiting, it's how to retain the people today. So we're doing a lot of things about, I'm not sure it's the right translation, but we have work councils on every workplace where management and employees work closely together to see how to enhance every daily operations. And we have across the organization, we have different association or sport. And we have a sports club where you can join. We have a museums club. We have also employers club that arrange parties and stuff like that. We also have a music club as well. So we're trying to do some activities where we have people meet outside the work environment to build up the social network. I think that's important as well, that generation meet each other, not in the hierarchy, but also outside the hierarchy. So we try to help that part. And we also very much into educating our leaders. I think that if we don't educate our management, we'll not succeed. I would really like to address the impatient thing. I don't think the new generation is, they are impatient. I think we just perceive them as being impatient because we have a different view. So I'm actually trying to learn myself, but also my management team, that we need to be curious. We also need to ask the why. We need to ask the why. Why are you addressing this issue like this? And I think my deputy and myself is trying to transform the organization from going from the hierarchy where all decisions are taken at the top of the organization to transform this. We call it the 1,000 brains organization, because we need all the employees to contribute to the organization. And we're trying to figure out a way so everybody can be heard, and so we can explore their ideas as well. So I think we're trying a lot, and we are not succeeded yet, but I think it's an ongoing process. But, and I think I hear a lot that the new generations, they don't want to stay at the workplace for a long time. I haven't seen that yet. I'm just preparing for it. So hopefully they will love our organization and stay there forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And thank you for that top tip around being curious. I think it works both ways. You're right. If they're asking the why, we need to ask the why as well. And how they perceive us and how we perceive them. It has to be about that whole, adaptation and trying to understand with curiosity is on both ends of the spectrum. So important. for any conversation and any way forward. Thank you for that, Lela. Let's close off with top tips from you.
A top tip, or what was the question again? We're talking about what we're doing, how we can improve, how I'm
Yes,
working
what
to
your
improve.
organization is doing to
Yeah, I think I've already touched on this quite a lot, but we're really building pathways that aren't just about young people or engaging the next generation, but are genuinely built for us and by us. So it's not just embedded in our messaging, in our comm strategy, but actually in everything from the start of the project's design, its delivery, and the decision making going forward. So with our student ambassador program, we've now had, I think, over 800 go through our program across 300 universities around the world. So not only are we dealing with the intergenerational aspect, but also the global and different cultures and experiences. And I've always said it to my students, like, if you're here and we've booked a one-to-one and I'm hearing from you, like, whatever it is you share with me stays with me, because what I've heard from them is they've often thought, oh, I don't want to like tell on IBM, like I don't want to like be ungrateful for the opportunity. And this is something I'm really trying to rewire when I do meet with my student ambassadors, because they think that because opportunities do tend to be very rare now for my generation, because the competition is so high, they think like they come across ungrateful if they do speak out or do suggest something. So really trying to change that with them and encourage them to co-create our campaigns. And we give them plenty of resources to run their own events and set up their own societies on campus. But we realize that we are a American technology company, and whatever it is that we're doing might not translate in, well, it definitely won't translate in every geography. So it's just as important that we give them the agency and the space and the skills, both the technical skills and the content, but also the professional development opportunities to feel confident as leaders in their own right on campus, and have them be recognized as emerging leaders within the industry. And we do that through reverse mentorship, where it's not just having someone from the industry speak at you and be like, oh, back in my day when I was your age, like this is how to get started, but rather letting the industry leaders learn from young people. And literally my boss today, I started off by being her kind of mentor in that way, where it was COVID, it was a pinnacle of like, we can't just rely on what we think we know, because no one had ever lived through the pandemic before. No one had ever experienced remote learning. So I say, yeah, reverse mentorship being not just a buzzword, but actually a structural tool has been vital. And it's looking at those pipelines, and it's looking at like how we can make sure that we do answer that why, and we do have use cases of where our machines are mission critical in delivering workloads for a large percentage, the majority of the world's economy, but also how is it being used like for good. So looking at some of our case studies around climate, around how we're addressing the sustainable development goals in some of our research, just so we have that when students ask us like, are we part of the problem? Like, how do we know that we're actually doing good and this is the right way to go if you want to lead an impact driven career? So yeah, it's not just about building this funnel and a really strict talent pipeline, but it's also about how we can actually broaden that out and build a community and a sense of belonging around it. Because I think that we as a generation are bringing our whole selves to work more than ever, whether it's in my style, my lingo, and some of the slang I'll use in discussions with people older than me. Like, I think that that's the first time that we're kind of doing that, and we don't see our job as our defining trait. We don't see our job title as like our whole personality. There's a lot more to me than my work, and the work that I do is always led by my purpose and my passion and my morals and beliefs. And if something isn't right and isn't aligned with that, you might not have the fix overnight and be able to change things to make it entirely aligned. But as we've spoken about, we have that curiosity and we have that kind of willingness to challenge it and to also think positively about those solutions. So the intergenerational piece is, as I say, it's not just this add-on or part of like an identity, but it's also at the heart of what it is that we actually do and the solutions that we drive going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that right there is a truth bomb, isn't it? I mean, my generation, and I know the ones before me, without stereotyping, the job is such a big part of our identity, and I think in fire service, especially, Jacob, I mean, there is firefighters will not even put their tools down as they're running towards safety, because that's so much a part of the tools of a firefighter are a part of the identity, let alone the fact that the job that you do becomes you. But this generation, so it'll be quite interesting that, in the police and the fire services for the new generation, what does that really mean in terms of loyalty and identity and how they value that? So great conversation there. Let me bring it all back to CQ, which is why we're really here actually, which is this whole conversation. What we have on the panel today is we've got Srinal, who is working for a German bank based in the UK, right? And we've got Lela, who's working for an American firm based in the UK. You've got Jacob, who works within the Danish fire services, and I'm an Indian entrepreneur within a British environment, in a British setting. So again, you've got all these mix of nationalities, different sectors, and 3 different generations in the workplace. This is what the real world looks like outside, right? This is exactly what's happening in the real world as well. So navigating it from a nationality, from the sector that you're in, from the generation you're in, can be quite tricky. So let me break it down using the cultural intelligence tool and lens to it. And the reason I do this work around CQ is how adaptable this framework is to any difference, including generational. So let's start with that. Cultural intelligence is the ability to work with people that is different from us. It's broken down into 4 capabilities: drive, knowledge, strategy, action. What we discussed during this conversation is CQ drive is that motivation. Let's unpack what is your motivation in the workplace, but also what is the motivation of the different generations that are coming in. It's that two-level lens as far as CQ is concerned. Be very clear about why you're at work, what's motivating you, and please make an effort to understand what's motivating those coming from different generations. That's your drive. The knowledge is really about what those generations are expecting from the workplace. What is it that will keep them there? How can you recruit them? When I did some work for the fire services in the UK, when we're advertising for the roles, where are we advertising them, right? How much are we using social media when we try and recruit from different places? Who do we want to recruit and how do we want to recruit? But also, how do we want to keep them and how do we retain that talent? There's some great truth prompts there around staying relevant. And then how do you do, what knowledge do you need to stay relevant? The third aspect of CQ is CQ strategy. That's the part where the planning comes in, where the reflection comes in. Srinal mentioned there that how are you providing feedback, but also giving people time to reflect on that feedback? That's that CQ strategy part. How are we rethinking our thinking in a nutshell? This is where CQ strategy comes in, because we're going to have to rethink how the systems are put in place. How do we give people the opportunities to collaborate? And so Jacob shared a great point around even those music clubs and sports clubs and breaking down those hierarchies, because communication styles are different. And how are we breaking those barriers down and making it happen? And last but not the least is that last question that I asked the panelist around what are organizations doing? That's that CQ action part. So reverse mentoring, creating career guides where, understanding that job title isn't the defining factor, educating the leaders, diversifying how we recruit and how we retain. All of that is part of that CQ action. So this is where using the framework that is cultural intelligence to navigate cross-generational differences, to bring together those intergenerational perspectives that we hired people for in the first place, and stay relevant, because if you can't stay relevant, you're not going to survive. And so that really is the bottom line. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes for questions now. And more than, let's bring it on. If anyone wants to speak up, I can allow the talking function. That's what comes up here. So if anyone wants to share their thoughts or speak up, please feel free. You've got an expert panel here, experts who really have that lived experience across 3 generations. So talk to us about some of the challenges in your organizations or you personally are facing as a leader as you navigate cross-generational differences, and we are here to help. So Sophia has her hand up. Excellent. I'm going to try and allow you to talk, Sophia. Let's see if this works. Yes, I think let's see. Sophia, I have unmuted you. Can you? No? Do you want to put it in the chat? No, I can't hear you. It says allow to talk. Right, I know what I'm doing here. Got it. Okay. I need to add Sophia. Yeah, there you go. Can you unmute yourself and
Can
yeah?
you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello. Hi, everyone. This is such a rich conversation. You're all so powerful in sharing your insights. So thank you. And thank you, Ritika, for inviting us all to take part in this discourse. It's you think you know it, and then you hear people, of different experiences talk, and you think, gosh, I've still got so much learning to do. So Ritika, this one's for you actually. So you talked about the experience of the workshop you led and not having that engagement and feeling probably quite disheartened, right? Because I've been in virtual rooms where screens are off and it feels like there's no engagement. And equally, I've walked in, my son is in second year of university, so he's like coming to 20 years old. And when he joins his lectures online, like there's 20 odd, whatever, 25 students, and none of them have the screens on. But I see him. He's got his headphones on, he's got his notepad, the room is dark, there's no light, but he's making notes. I'm like, what is going like this is so like I have to be fully business ready, lights on, show mode on, and then so how do we balance that? How do we balance, like, I think, Leila, you mentioned like that performative versus, what was it? Performative versus progress.
Progress.
Yeah. So I guess this is how do we balance that? And how do we not get this level of, like being disheartened, thinking, oh, people are not engaging when the younger style of communication is completely so different. So how did you adapt and how do we show up? And, so I'm just, for transparency, as you can't see me, I'm someone firmly in her mid 40s. So I'm that generation, that decade. We showed up, like being present was everything, right? Looking like you're engaged was nodding and smiling and doing the career laughs, and all those things has been ingrained in me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just love to hear your thoughts.
So, generational differences are no different from any other values that we grew up with, right? And so, practicing, unlearning what we have learned or know that this is familiar and thus this is the right way to do it, unlearning that is so important in order for us to show up with that curiosity to say, okay, this is the way I have always done it. This is what feels right to me. But let me unlearn that for a minute and see why and what. So Jacob mentioned that early on in the conversation to say if the younger generation is saying why I need to clean the garage, then the older generation is also asking themselves why are they asking why they need to clean the garage, right? And so the curiosity from both, because ultimately what has kept me going in difficult situations is the motivation, that CQ drive. Why are we doing this work? What outcome we want from it? And so keeping that front and center rather than letting the niggles that will happen when we work across differences come in the way is for me the secret mantra. But the panel has anything to add, I'd be more than happy to get yeah, Jacob?
I can totally follow you, Sophia. When I look at my oldest son studying, I'm just, what are you doing? You're juggling a ball inside the living room while you're listening to your professor. So I can't fully understand what he's doing. Hopefully he'll learn something. And I talked to my mom about it. I said to, William, I was just, letting steam out to my mother. And then my mother said, yeah, but when you were young, I couldn't understand how you studied either. So I think actually each generation has their own. I just think we really need to, I'm really trying to not be biased and not be prejudgment to my son, because they have their things. I'm just need to be much more curious. I'm really hard and really quick to judge people when I see them behaving in another way than I am. So I think for me, it's about my patience and it's about my curiosity. So, but I can totally follow you, Sophia, on this one.
I needed the validation. Thank you.
If I could just add one quick point, I find that when you offer them responsibility, they rise to that level of responsibility. So, and I think that holds true for my generation and the ones that follow me. So every time we have some of these challenges, let's say, my go-to strategy is to, even if it's an intern, right? I will be like, okay, you have this one page that you need to present to the client and you're responsible for it. And the quality of work, the research, the practice that they do in terms of, how am I going to talk about this? Do you think this is correct? And then they're so much more engaged, ask so many more questions. And just that one experience then changes every interaction that follows, because now they also believe that I will give them opportunity when they show me that they are going to meet that, let's say, benchmark that we've set. And similarly for me, I think when my manager gives me that responsibility, I act the same way. So I think we just need to be more comfortable in allowing them to show their best selves, and they will rise to that challenge. I've never been in a situation where that hasn't happened.
That's such a great tip. Thank you, Srinal. I see Richenda's hand is up. I hope we can hear you. Let's get your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Wow, what a fascinating afternoon we're having. Yeah, a couple of things actually. I just wanted to pick up there what Sophia has just said about the approaches to learning. I deliver a lot of training. I work with a lot of team of trainers, and I do believe that it doesn't matter what the age is. You've got to make sure the learning is an approach that works for those particular people in front of you, and those people in front of you may all be different. So, the style of teaching and learning has to be very learner-centered in order to appeal to everybody. And I think it was Dale Carnegie who said, I like strawberries, but fish like worms. So there's no point me giving fish strawberries. They need worms. So again, we have to adjust our style of teaching, training, facilitating, managing according to who's in front of us, I believe. But what I originally wanted to ask was one from Jakob, in that, you work in a slightly military type environment, organization, and I work a lot in the defense and security sector. And the difficulty, I think, that is there, and I'd love to know your opinion on it, is how do you marry up the need for people to act and not question in the times of emergency, follow orders, do stuff, because that's what we have to do, and that's how we do it, and not question that procedure. Obviously, questioning can happen in training, but in the moment, in dealing with an emergency, there's no time for questioning. So how do you deal with that in the different generations?
Thank you for the question, Shanda. It's a very important question. We haven't had any issues with that. We are very, very clear that during an emergency, we don't have, there's no time for questioning. Then we rely on the system. And that's where the hierarchy is very strict. But after an emergency, we allow people to come and to evaluate both their own effort and the team's effort. So we do a lot of what's it called evaluation after each incident, and then we for emergency workers most of the time is back at the station, exercising, practicing. So during these times they are allowed to ask why they do different things, but in the case of emergency we don't allow it. And I can remember one time I had an issue with some employees who questioned an incident commander, and we had an evaluation afterwards, and we all of us were fully aware of the situation. And I think it's most important that we have each other's back, and nobody, not even the management, will allow people to go in somewhere where they don't want to go themselves. So it's about the work safety, and we're very much into work safety environments. So, but we haven't seen that problem yet, but and I really don't hope we'll see it. So, but I think it's about evaluation and have an open dialogue before and after an incident. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. It is an area that I think is potentially a problem. And also I worked in a hospital for some time, you know, you don't want people questioning in the moment. Yeah, it might be if you see bad practice really happening, but if it's orders that have to be followed, then they have to be followed. But I liked you're coming back to reflect on it afterwards. And then presumably that facilitation of that reflection has to be done in such a way that everybody feels that they've had their say and their opportunity to question, which is lessons identified, lessons learned.
Straight, such a great conversation and great observation. There's a book called Black Box Thinking from Matthew Syed that I would urge in terms of failures and learning from that and hierarchy. But we are at time. My God, where did that hour go? Where did it go? Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. There is a recording available for everyone that signed up and, of course, who's here today for posterity. But I can't thank the amazing panel enough for showing up, for giving your top tips. And we didn't get to that top tip in the end, but I think we covered most of it through the conversation. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon, everyone.